The first thing I saw was thick smoke. Not the kind that drifts up from a backyard grill or a fire pit on a cold evening. This was thick, black, and ugly, curling over the water like it had crawled out of the lake itself. By the time I got down to the shoreline, my private dock was already half gone. The wooden planks were charred, the support posts were cracking, and the smell of burned timber hit me so hard it felt like a heavy punch. Then I saw the HOA president standing right at the edge of my property with her arms folded, watching it happen like she'd ordered lunch. She looked calm, too calm. And that was the moment I knew this was no accident. This was revenge. Let me take you back to how all of this started. My name is Lucas Vance, and that dock was more than a structure to me. It was the first thing I repaired after buying the lake house my father left me. He had built that dock with his own hands decades earlier, back when our family still came out here every summer with tackle boxes, folding chairs, and a cooler full of sandwiches. It had become part of our family story. Every board, every nail, every weather-worn railing carried a memory. After my father died, I poured myself into keeping the place alive. I fixed the roof, replaced the water line, and completely rebuilt the stairs. And when the old dock started to sag, I spent 4 weekends restoring it, piece by piece, because I wanted it to survive one more generation. I wasn't rich. I wasn't careless. I was just a man trying to protect his land. The HOA in our community had always been a nuisance, but before that night, I had never imagined they would turn dangerous. The president was a woman named Victoria Sterling, and she had an expression of superiority. She dressed like every meeting was a courtroom, and every homeowner was already guilty. Her favorite sentence was, "That's not in compliance," even when she clearly didn't really know what she was talking about at all. She had been fixated on my dock for months. First, she claimed it blocked the visual line of the shoreline. Then she said my lights were too bright. Then she said my dock was encroaching on common aesthetic standards. That was a fancy way of saying she didn't like that it was mine and not hers. I ignored the first few letters because they were stupid on their face. My dock sat entirely right on my deeded waterfront property line. I had the survey, the plat map, the property deed, and the permit history to prove it. But once people like Victoria decide they want something gone, they don't stop at letters. They start escalating things fast. One afternoon, I came home to find a citation taped to my gate demanding that I remove the dock within 14 days or face daily fines. No court order, no hearing, no legal basis, just a printed threat with her name. I sent back copies of my deed and survey. 3 days later, she sent another notice claiming my shoreline improvements violated HOA authority because the community water view was being diminished by my private dock. That was my first warning that this woman wasn't just overreaching. She was preparing to cross a line she couldn't come back from. And still, I never thought they'd burn anything. Not until I saw smoke rising up high. Not until I saw Victoria Sterling standing there like she had every right to destroy private property in the dark. Why was an HOA president smiling while my dock burned? I didn't scream at her right away at all. I didn't give her the satisfaction. I pulled out my phone and started recording everything. The smoke, the damage, the timestamp, her face, and the fact that several HOA maintenance trucks were parked right nearby, even though no one had given me notice of any work. One of the workers was still holding a gas can. Another had a radio clipped to his vest. Nobody tried to deny what had happened. They just went completely still. They were waiting to see whether I'd break first. Victoria finally spoke. She said the dock had been removed due to ongoing compliance concerns. That was the word she chose. Removed, as if someone neatly took it. As if someone took away a lawn ornament instead of torching a private structure beside a lake. I told her to repeat that on camera, and she refused. Then she claimed the HOA had authority over community water space. I asked her to show me the clause. She said it was under review. That was when I knew she was making it up in real time. The next morning, I called my attorney, filed a police report, and submitted a formal demand letter. I attached everything: the deed, survey, permit records, photographs, and the footage from my phone. I also sent a preservation notice requiring them to keep every email, text, meeting minute, and contractor invoice. I expected them to back off. Instead, they doubled down. By the end of the week, I received a second packet from the HOA. This one accused me of violating fire safety rules because I created hazardous conditions. They claimed the fire had started because of my negligence. That was their move: blame the victim, then bury him in paperwork. I laughed when I saw it, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind you make in disbelief. Because that same afternoon, my attorney called back and asked me one question. "Do you know who signed the maintenance contract for the work around your dock?" I said no. He told me to check the attached invoice carefully. The contractor was a shell company with no active license, no local office, and no insurance on file. Worse, the invoice included charges for shoreline remediation dated before the fire report had even been filed. That was the twist. They hadn't just destroyed my dock. They had built a paper trail to pretend they had the right to do it. So I went deeper. I requested public records from the county and checked shoreline maps. I pulled archived HOA minutes from the last 8 months. What I found changed everything. Victoria and 2 board members had quietly approved an emergency waterfront risk mitigation plan without homeowner vote, without legal review, and without disclosing that the HOA had no authority over deeded private docks. Then I found something even worse. A former board secretary had resigned 5 weeks earlier and left an email. An email thread that had never been deleted. In it, Victoria wrote that if I kept resisting, they would make the dock issue disappear one way or another. One way or another. That wasn't a policy dispute anymore. That was intent. I forwarded everything to my attorney and a contact he had in regulatory enforcement. The response came fast. Too fast for a normal neighborhood dispute. The contractor was already being watched. A federal investigator was looking into suspicious billing patterns across multiple properties. My dock wasn't the only thing they'd been touching, and that was the part Victoria never expected me to discover. The HOA hadn't just violated my property rights, they had tied themselves to a paper network that federal eyes were already following. By the time I finished that research, I knew exactly what I held in my hands. Evidence, and not just enough to win in civil court, enough to bring the whole board down. I stopped responding to the HOA by email and started responding through my attorney. Then I did something completely unexpected. I filed for emergency injunctive relief and requested an expedited hearing over the dock destruction, false fines, and unauthorized contractor work. I also submitted the preservation packet directly to federal eyes, along with the invoice trail, board minutes, and the email chain that mentioned making the dock disappear. That move changed the temperature immediately. Suddenly, the HOA wasn't sending smug letters anymore. They were sending panic. One board member called my phone from a blocked number and told me I was taking this too far. Another left a voicemail saying I didn't understand how communities work. They were scared. Victoria herself sent a message accusing me of trying to attack the entire neighborhood over a minor structure. Minor structure. That was what she called the dock my father built and I had repaired with my hands. The hearing was scheduled for the following Thursday, and I arrived with my attorney. A folder full of records and a calm confidence. The HOA showed up in full force. Victoria sat at the front with board members. She had the same polished expression she always wore in meetings, like she was about to discipline children. She had a thick stack of binders in front of her, but when the judge asked for legal authority, she froze. Her lawyer hesitated. That hesitation told the whole room more than any answer could have. Then my attorney laid out the deed, the survey, the permit history, and the invoice trail. He showed my dock was private. He showed that no emergency authority existed, and that the contractor they used had no valid license. He then introduced the email thread. When the line about making the dock disappear was read, the room changed. Victoria's face didn't just go pale, it emptied completely. Then came the part she never saw coming. The investigator, who had been seated quietly in the back, stood up and identified himself as a federal agent. He explained that the contractor tied to my dock was already part of a larger financial review, and my documents connected the HOA to fraudulent billing. That was the exact moment the entire courtroom froze solid. And right there, with my deed on the table and board members staring at the floor, I want to pause. Because stories like this are why people keep watching. Hit like and subscribe to HOA Drama Neighbor right now. Sometimes the only thing standing between a bully and the truth is someone willing to keep the receipts. The investigator asked Victoria whether she authorized the destruction of private property. She said no. Then he asked why her board minutes described the dock as scheduled for removal. She said she didn't remember. Then he asked why the contractor had billed for work before any fire report existed. She said nothing, and that silence was louder than any admission. The judge granted the emergency injunction immediately, froze further HOA action against my property, and ordered the board to preserve all records pending review. Within hours, the HOA office went from loud and confident to dead quiet. Their confidence had been built on intimidation, and once forced into the light, it collapsed. By sunset, federal warrants were prepared. The final collapse came faster than anyone expected. 3 days after the hearing, federal agents arrived at the HOA office with boxes, cameras, and warrants. They didn't arrive with sirens, blazing, or movie drama. They didn't need to. The door opened, agents stepped inside, and the entire board suddenly understood that their paperwork, their lies, and their fake authority were over. Victoria was the first one escorted out. Not in handcuffs at first, just surrounded by agents while she tried to keep her chin high and act insulted instead of terrified. But that act only lasted a few seconds. Once all the records were seized, it was over. Once contractor files were compared, once emails and minutes were pulled from office computers, the story became impossible to deny. They had coordinated demolition. They had submitted false invoices to everyone. They had used HOA power to threaten a homeowner over private property they did not control. And the federal review didn't stop there. The contractor's license was suspended. HOA fine collection was frozen solid. Several board members were removed from office under emergency action. The community was placed under outside oversight while investigators sorted through damage. Victoria stood trying to explain her signature. She didn't have an answer for that either. As for my dock, the court order forced the HOA to cover the full replacement cost, legal fees, and emergency shoreline repair. They had to send a notice to all homeowners, admitting that the board had acted without lawful authority. That part mattered more to me than money, because money rebuilds wood. The notice rebuilt trust. I still remember the day the new dock was finished. The water was calm. The sunlight was bright. And for the first time in months, I stood at the edge of the shore without feeling like I was waiting for someone to take something. I sat in a chair at the end of dock. I just looked out across the lake and let the silence feel peaceful again. What happened to Victoria and the board? They never got to hide behind community standards after that. Their names were linked to fraud. Their meetings were monitored, and the neighborhood that used to be ruled by threats finally had a chance to breathe. That is what this victory meant to me. It proved private property is not just a suggestion. It proved intimidation is not authority. And that people who abuse trust run into someone who kept every document, photo, and receipt. Make sure to watch HOA Drama Neighbor so you never miss a single update from us. Drop your craziest stories in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more boundary battles every week. Thanks for watching today's story, and I will see you in the very next video. Folks,